Hey there. So I don't know if you're aware, but there has been a trend going around the pagan YouTube community. And that trend has centered on making one's own Book of Shadows. And I'm exhausted because I just jumped on that bandwagon, albeit taking the easy way out and not actually making something quite like others have made. As far as I know, this trend started with Elle from Sacred Seed, who discovered this tutorial series that had been posted on YouTube a while ago. I will link all of these videos in the description, just in case you haven't caught them. And after Elle made hers, Kelly from The Truth and Story and Patrick from In the 78 Cards both made their own versions. And so it's been delightful watching these. These are fantastic videos. You will be really impressed with the quality of what they managed to produce. And if this idea appeals to you, I definitely recommend checking out all of the videos. Don't just watch one or two, because with every iteration, you get more advice, more tips and tricks, because they are all learning from one another. And every time, you will just make your life simpler. Now, these homemade books of shadows are really cool because they're post-bound. They're all, thus far, you could make them any size, but thus far they've been made to accommodate printer paper. So standard 8.5 by 11 paper sheets, which isn't to say that you couldn't buy parchment or whatever, but that's really handy because it means you can use a 3-hole punch to prep any page you want. And because it's post-bound, you can reorganize that Book of Shadows anytime you want. You can take something out if you don't like it and there won't be a torn page left over. You can shuffle stuff around. You don't have to purposefully leave huge chunks of blank pages in the hopes that you'll actually fill out that section on herbs one day. So the flexibility is really lovely and definitely appealed to me. As I've mentioned before, I'm one of these people who cannot use fancy journals. I can't write in them. If I try, I have a really hard time starting because I don't want to fuck up. And then invariably, of course, I do fuck up because first off, my books of shadows are my books of mirrors, are my tarot journals. Which is to say that in the afterglow of ritual, I am not at my best from either a spelling standpoint or from a pretty writing standpoint. I've got sections in my books of shadows that are just, I use lined paper and it's just nowhere near being parallel to any of the lines on the page. I just go with it. And the reason I can do that is because I decided to start using just these plain black Moleskine notebooks. Unassuming, simple, nothing to write home about, and because they're not fancy, I don't feel the need to put off writing stuff down just because I'm afraid to muck it up. So that's a really nice aspect of the post-bound books. However, I'm not somebody who likes my book to be organized thematically. I really like the chronological ordering, and the reason I like it and the reason I combine my Book of Mirrors with my Book of Shadows is that I don't necessarily write every detail when I'm writing out the rituals or my spells, but invariably the components find their genesis in stuff I've experienced before, stuff I've done before, realizations, insights. And if you don't have the more journal-esque sections in there, you just wouldn't get where I was coming from. I also like to be able to track my progress, go back and see what's going on. In order to be able to find stuff again, all I do is I keep an index at the front of these puppies, and I only list the actual spells and rituals themselves, and then all the rest in between is filled in with Book of Mirrors stuff. So I love these post-bound books of shadows, but one, I'm already committed to the Moleskine notebook. I do not want to have to recopy every word, and I would want to recopy every word because I like having that record, but man, did I covet the pretty. It was, I love fancy journals. I love them, I just can't use them. And so this marathon sparked one of these demons in me that just really made me want a fancy journal. And after having stumbled across this site by this custom bookmaker who is a fucking artist, good God, I am also including his link in the description. You must go see this man. He is just amazing. I would give him all the monies. But that's a bad idea. And after coming dangerously close to spending just an obscene amount of money on a really pretty journal that of course I would never use again, I decided I would draw inspiration from all these people who have posted beautiful Books of Shadows videos and make my own as well. Except with a twist being that I'm not making a post-bound Book of Shadows from scratch. I'm committed to the Moleskine thing. What I'm doing is I'm making an envelope for my Book of Shadows. Now, what I do with my Book of Shadows is, once I complete one of these, I just bought another exactly the same Moleskine book and just glued one sucker onto the other. So it's definitely not elegant, but it works. And that way I have all my stuff together. The thing is, I do enjoy witchy aesthetic. I like pretty things. And the series of videos really sparked that bug. So I decided, what the hell, I would make a slipcover for these Moleskine notebooks so that it would be pretty on the outside, but it would still just be basic black Moleskine notebooks. I could take the slipcover off, put it on something else. I wouldn't be stuck with the same pattern that I get from a pre-published, properly bound pretty journal. I also decided that I would do this for $0 with stuff that I just had around the house. Now, before you run away with some idea of me being just uber thrifty and clever, the reality is that I have tons of shit around the house because I enjoy crafting. I have many hobbies that are crafty, and so I had everything I needed to pull this project off. Now, I didn't film the actual making, but I did take some pictures along the way, so I will walk you through those after having presented you with the fancy slipcover. So after toiling all evening, this is what I have ended up with. My new Book of Shadows. Yay! Cheers! Applause. This Book of Shadows was made with leftover black velvet that I had from having made a scrying mirror for myself and my lovely friend whom I circle with. Chain that I use for jewelry making and dressing candles. This is a little bit of stag's horn. I also do wire wrapping, so I have plenty of wire. I have just an obscene number of keys for crafting and decorative purposes. I had some leftover black lace, double-sided black lace from a Halloween costume that I had made. And this beautiful brooch that I inherited. This book is a simple slipcover that fits over top of my two glued together Moleskine notebooks, and I just slip the cover of the front, the cover of the back, into this little envelope that I made. And because in time there will be more Moleskine notebooks being glued onto the back of this, I wanted to make sure that I could expand this envelope so that it would fit a third book and a fourth book one day, if the envelope lasts that long, if the sheath survives. So what I did was I gave myself some extra room on the spine region and then just used chain to corset stitch it so that the excess was pulled taut until such a time as I needed it, and then I could just loosen the chain. I used black wire to create anchors. I attached jump rings to those. Jump rings, if you make jewelry, you'll be familiar with them. If you don't, they are simply little metal circles with a slit in them that you can twist open in order to attach to links on a chain or a bangle or what have you. So I attached a jump ring to the anchor and then just threaded the chain through the jump rings on either side of the spine, resulting in what I think is awfully dapper prettiness right here. The excess chain I attached some bangles to. These will be able to double as bookmarks. The key being flat, I was able to keep shorter because of course it would lie flat. If you're going to use something three-dimensional, like I did here, you want to make sure that the chain is long enough that when this is threaded through the page, the bangle itself sticks at the bottom so you don't end up with a giant bump in the middle of your book. Finally, you may have noticed that the edges are rough. They're not seamed. I did not sew this together inside out and then flip it back right way around. The rough edges mean that it will fray in time. I'm hoping that it gives it a sort of nice, homey, custom look. This was a calculated decision based on the fact that I am by no means a seamstress. And rather than attempt to make everything perfect and crisp, which in my opinion only draws attention to the inevitable crooked line, or lines, more realistically, that I would sew, I think that if it's rough looking enough, when something is rough looking enough, it looks intentional. All the little deviations look like they just add character. They don't look like they're mistakes. And so the roughness doesn't come off, in my opinion, as though you're basically using it to compensate for the fact that you're not any good at the thing you're trying to do. So there we go, and I kept the seams on the lace rough as well. So all of this will fray and wear, and I'm hoping that it looks charming as it does. So like I said, I took some pictures, and I will narrate what I'm showing you now. They're pretty straightforward. This is an incredibly easy thing to make. It's a lot less work, I think, than the actual Book of Shadows from scratch that other people made. Basically, you need a chunk of fabric. You're going to trace the outline of the covers, both covers. Give yourself extra room in the spine if you want to do something like I have done and have that sleeve be able to grow with your book. And then you need the 2 additional flap pieces that you will sew to the inside of your book in order to make the sleeve. Now, one thing worth noting is you want to cut this a little bit bigger if you want the rough edge, and when you sew it, you really want to make sure that you're sewing on the actual outline. You want this to be fitted to the page, to the cover of your notebook, or else your book's going to slide around in there, and that'll be, I imagine that would be deeply annoying. You want to make sure that little bit is exact. Everything else can be rough. Once you have all of those pieces, you sew them together as displayed in this image that I will drop into the video now. The next thing I did was added the anchors made out of black wire along the spine, those anchors that would hold the jump rings that I could thread the chain through. For this, I used 30 gauge black coated wire. You can use thread. You want a strong thread though, and if you use thread, instead of just sewing one X like I did with the wire, you're going to want to sew several X's, one atop the other. I don't know, I'm sure there's a technical term for this. I have no idea what that would be. But basically you want to make sure that the anchors are strong enough to handle being pulled a little bit. You want those X's to be not too close to the middle. Obviously, the further in they are, the more adjustable your cover will be. Once you have those, just attach jump rings to each of those anchors. Take your chain or your pretty twine or any long, thin piece of something and lace it through those jump rings. And what you're going to do is you're going to bend. See here? You're going to bend the excess like this as you lace it up so that you end up with a nice, tight spine that you can let out over time. By the way, don't let this thing fool you. The rest of it is really not pretty, not decorated, just very basic sort of writing. So that's it. That's the whole thing. It was very simple and very straightforward. So for you basic notebook users out there, this is one option for making your own, I think, fairly pretty Book of Shadows without having to restart the process of writing all your shit. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm sorry for the absolutely chaotic quality of this particular video. Have a fantastic night.